All right. What is it, Sunday morning? Screwed up on my video yesterday. I had the GoPros were set differently fishing yesterday with a higher setting, which made downloading the files onto the laptop excruciatingly slow. Oh my god, it was painful. But anyway, so I just might have two. This might be the second video load for today, maybe. We'll see how it goes. But anyway, what's new here? One thing for certain is I'm jumping on a plane this week. 100% guaranteed. I'm jumping on a plane. And the majority of my travels will be to enhance the knowledge of this group of people right here. That's what I'm doing. Confirmed. I'll share what direction later. It's funny, about a handful of people email me, go, don't ever say your plans online. There's crazy people out there. Don't ever show your license plate. There's crazy people out there. It's basically these days you can find anybody's house. It doesn't take long, right? And I've shared it millions of times, not millions of times, a lot of times in the past. I live in the end of a rural road and I'm surrounded by tight neighbors who can see my property from all angles. And there isn't one of these neighbors that I would like to be caught as a criminal by. You'd be really, really bad. So there. It's a very, very secure place. And if somebody's cuckoo enough to think, okay, I'm across the country, I have a guy on YouTube that really pisses me off. I just heard he's flying away. I'm going to go jump on a plane or a bus and I'm going to go to his house. Okay. Enough of those emails, you guys, all right? Enough. Enough of them. Yeah, you'd have to be, let's just say it wouldn't be a good idea. Now listen to this. This is from Bobby Short's digging. And she had a lot to share. She took in a lot when it came to army bases, military compounds, whatever. When it came to these unacknowledged beings that are running around us. Now listen to this. This is Fort Lewis. Fort Lewis in Washington State has come up a lot. This is in 1966. Pierce County, Washington State, Fort Lewis Army Base. Ron Tribble. My sighting occurred February 27th, 1966, while stationed at Fort Lewis, Washington. It was me and 4 other men out on survival training in the Nisqually River Basin, about 30 miles south of Tacoma, Washington. We decided to go to the river that day to catch some fish. As we approached the river, we could see the creature. It was kneeling by the water. Then, as we walked towards it, the creature stood up on 2 legs and looked at us, and then turned and walked into the river and swam easily to the other side. When it reached the other side, it turned toward us and looked at us for about 10 minutes, then turned and walked into the forest. The thing that got our attention was the way it moved. It walked for about 8 yards on 2 legs, just like a man. We stood and watched it. I would say initially it was only 10 to 20 feet from us. We could see it very clearly. It stood 8 to 9 feet tall, had kind of reddish brown hair covering most of its body, except for its hands and face. The head was the shape of a man. It appeared to have no neck. The mouth was large and protruding lips. We saw no teeth. It did not bear its teeth. Its nose was quite large and lay flat against its face. The encounter lasted for 20 minutes. And not once during this time was there any sign of aggression. It seemed more curious than aggressive. We returned to our camp, more amazed than fearful. Looked like a man. Again and again, looked like a man. Here's another one. Fort Lewis Army Base maneuvers. Mount Rainier, 1978. My name is Carol Steckel, and I'm about to tell you about my domestic partner, Tim Rivas Sr. Tim was in the 9th Infantry Division, 3rd Battalion, 47th Infantry, Combat Support Recon Platoon, North Fort Lewis. He was on aggressor detail on Mount Rainier training area. It was late one night and he wanted to get off alone. He walked off a ways from his army buddies so he could have a smoke and eat something. Rivas was crouching down and had some small pieces of wood so he could heat up his Dinty Moor beef stew. Then he felt he was being watched by something. He turned around, and only a few feet away, leaning against the tree, was this Bigfoot. He didn't seem afraid. He just stared at Tim. The Bigfoot was tall and slender, reminding Tim that the creature was probably very young. Tim also said the Bigfoot had the reddest eyes he had ever seen. And to the best of his knowledge, they could have been bloodshot eyes. Tim said he chose that area to relax because there was some green moss on the ground. He stopped at that point to smoke and heat up and eat his can of stew. His stint in the Army was from 77 to 79 at Fort Lewis Army Base, Washington. The incident with Bigfoot was in 1978. He never told any military what he saw because he thought they wouldn't believe him. But Tim would never make up this story. He's a quiet, private person who usually keeps everything to himself. He gave permission to use his real name, which is Timothy R. Rivas. His rank was Spec 4 in 1978. There's so many in Fort Lewis, it's absolutely ridiculous. I'm pretty sure we'd have some recent ones too, a lot. If I can recall clearly, which is kind of tough these days, but you never know. There's another one, Fort Lewis Army Base, Pierce County, Washington, 1989. We were on a field exercise with the 864th Engineer Battalion in November of 1989. About all I can remember is that we were about 1 mile from the Nisqually River. We marched out the day before and built a 3-rope bridge for the Rangers. It was in the training area northwest of the old C-5 mock-up or training aircraft. It was oddly clear and the moon was bright. A fellow soldier and I were sitting in a foxhole around 4 a.m. in the morning when my buddy suddenly exclaimed, "What the hell is that?" When I looked directly in front, about 25 yards, I witnessed something that scared me. It was human form, 7 to 8 feet tall, walking with a slight hunch about the shoulder and making a low grunting noise. This thing was just unbelievable. There was a slight musky odor, but not too bad. It smelled like wet dog. Anyway, my friend and I told our story to our squad leader, and he just laughed. He spoke to our first sergeant, and we were known as the 2 Bigfoot hunters. Well, after that, we wouldn't mention it anymore. But listen up, folks. There are things out there on the base unimaginable. I always said I would have to see it to believe it. Well, I saw it. Regarding the Bigfoot report above, this letter, a follow-up email came in from a man living in Iowa who took over his parents' family farm there. His letter was brief. Miss Short, I read the message about the sighting at Fort Lewis in fall of '89. I believe that I was that man's sergeant. I will verify his story is true and tell you additionally that Fort Lewis has a whole company of Bigfoot living on that base. Must be 70 or more scattered around that base, and that ain't no joke. A few get shot to death by scared E2s once in a great while, and mostly the sightings don't get reported. Those that do, nothing is said. I personally believe the base was constructed to protect that large contingency of big feet because no effort was ever made to rid the base of them. And believe me, we would have annihilated all of them, big feet, if we'd been ordered to do that. No problem. That's an interesting statement. Remember, we love the smell of napalm in the morning, LOL. The order never came down that I know about, but no effort was made to keep the grunts from shooting them either. I read the report on your website about the big feet don't die, but become invisible. That's bull pucky. I helped remove a dead one that was shot in '88. It was roughly 8 feet tall, male, and the strangest stiff I ever saw. It was shot up pretty good, but I could see its features plainly. We loaded it on the back of a truck, covered it with a canvas, and off it went, to where I don't know. We were ordered not to talk about it. The base there at Lewis is massive and strategically mapped in sections divided by roads. It has dense forests on the base and surrounding terrain with vegetation you can't crawl through. Ma'am, it's a dense jungle in some parts of that base. There was an off-limits part of the base where nobody was allowed. Mostly didn't know it existed. So I'm writing to support any question that big feet are thick at Louis. Yes, sir. Signed, Old Sergeant, Alamaki County, Iowa. That was in '09. Okay, here's one more. How'd you stop reading them, all right? Those are some pretty bold statements from that guy. So if he could write in back then, and numerous people saw these things, loaded the dead one, how many of those guys are watching this channel right now? I'm curious to know that. And if you are, you know what to do, right? If you would. I was a staff sergeant, E6 SSG, Sergeant of Military Police at the time of the incident, stationed at Fort Lewis, Washington. I'd gone to investigate a reported disturbance within the tree line near the post stockade. This occurred in late spring, May 1984. It was approximately 0300 to 0400 hours. The bars closed shortly before the call. The MPDO heard strange cries from within the forest, and he wanted it checked out. I went in one direction while the K9 unit went the other. We were to sweep the area. Excuse me. We planned to meet an old railroad old railroad spur, not too far into the trees. I saw nothing nor heard a sound until the K9 unit apparently made contact with something. I heard 5 distinct pistol shots, at which point I heard a deep, guttural growl building into extremely high-pitched howling. I'd never heard anything like that. And the sounds of something large crashing through the thick brush and foliage area. Important to note that I was too young, gung-ho, and stupid to be scared. I was armed with my issue 45 and 12-gauge riot gun and continued on down the rendezvous point, hearing nothing further. At the spur, sort of sunken with high berms, I went up the far side, halted at the edge of the large meadow. The captain was already there at the rendezvous point, having not seen anything either. Neither of us knew that the KO had fled the forest on the trail of KO, probably meant K9, had fled the forest on the trail of the dog. Okay, KO. Sorry. Must have been K9 officer. I don't know. Sorry. We were about to head back when I caught movement in the adjacent tree line off to my left. I could plainly see a large dark shape walking along the southeast edge of the meadow, but still within the tree line. Mount Rainier was southeast of my location, and this was the direction of the movement. It appeared to be a bear. I held my weapon at the ready. When the subject turned and came out into the meadow, it was approximately 35 yards from our position, moving from left to right. It did not register at first. I nearly pulled the trigger, but something didn't look right. Bears walk on all fours. This bear was clearly walking on 2 legs. It was getting on towards morning. False dawn was in evidence. I could see well enough, but not clearly enough to make out facial features. All I can figure is the wind must have shifted, or the creature stopped and turned its head and looked directly at me. It turned its whole body and just stood there looking at us, arms by its sides. The creature was not threatening us at all, so I lowered my weapon and did not open fire. I remember the head moving slightly from side to side. It did not move closer, and neither did we. We stared at each other for at least 2 to 3 minutes. A minute is like an hour in lifetime, in wildlife. Face to faces. I remember the head moving slightly side to side. Ultimately, it resumed its original direction and walked away, looking back once, but kept going, disappearing into the opposite tree line. The Bigfoot was covered in short, dark hair, massive arms and shoulders, probably 7.5 to 8 feet tall. The neck was not evident. The head bullet-shaped, though due to poor light conditions, I could not see any facial features clearly. It definitely was not Elvis or the Doughboy. I estimate the weight at the tracks we found later were cast Paris. My size 14, double E size. For rangers used to have problems with a cross the Nisqually River over in training area. All right, here's the photo. of the plaster cast footprint in the story. And you see it was a little confusing to read because there's text on either side of the photo. It's hard to see where it's supposed to be starting up. So, my son likes WWF wrestling. Oh no, the sentences go across the photo. All right, here we go. Let me see if I can pull this off. I gotta go back a little bit. I could not see facial features clearly, but I can say that it definitely was not Elvis or the Pillsbury Doughboy. I estimate the weight at close to 500 pounds. The tracks we later cast with plaster of Paris. My size 14 double E size foot for comparison. The Rangers used to have problems with comparison. What? The Rangers used to have problems with something nasty across the Nisqually River over in Rangers Rainier training area. Photos are Michael Coppola, Florida. Quote, my son likes WWF wrestling and I met Andre the Giant and shook his hand. If he's really 7'4", then this creature was taller than that. I'm 6'5" and recall the size difference between Andre the Giant and me. At the time of the sighting, we were neither drunk, crazy, nor on drugs. It wasn't a man in a suit either, not in a military base. I'll tell you now, no official report was ever made. I value my Army career more than a few moments of limelight. As I said, I saw an ape-like creature. I never said I saw Bigfoot. I'm 43 now, retired military, except for the plaster cast. I can't prove any of this. All I can tell you is I know what I saw. It no longer matters who believes me. Back in 1993, I went to Cairo, Michigan, to the Michigan Canadian Bigfoot Center. Investigator Wayne King's home. I told him of my incident, and he played an audio cassette. Hold on a minute. Of an alleged Bigfoot vocalization for me. The scream was exactly like the one I heard so long ago. I feel to this day there was more than one Bigfoot hanging around that area that day. The Rainier Ranger training area is dense, thick, and overgrown rugged country. Unless you stay on the dirt roads, you're apt to get lost. If you go into the bush, you best have a GPS and a loaded handgun because besides Bigfoot, there are bears in there. As for Feander Lake, I was back in there during the mid-'70s and it's really creepy. Bad area is the word. U.S. Army Sergeant, retired, Michael T. Coppola, North Carolina. Here's another short one. The reports from Pierce County are not limited. Okay, sorry. Here's another one. Spanaway resident Billy Joe Miller and her sister saw a creature they were sure was Bigfoot. It was around late August, early September 1975. The story of sightings in and around Fort Lewis McChord Army Base is quite plain. Quote, we were stopped beside the road with our family on the way back from a camping trip. We'd gone behind a tree to relieve ourselves. We started to walk back to where the truck was parked, and for no reason we both stopped walking, looked at each other, and turned around. To our complete surprise, the creature was standing back the way we had just come from. It was just standing there looking at us. It was over 6 feet tall, all hairy and dark brown. It didn't scare us or seem threatening, but it kept looking at us. It didn't appear scared or nervous, and it wasn't trying to hide. It was simply standing there in the open. We looked at it for about a minute, then we both turned around to walk back towards the truck and get the camera. We walked slowly so we wouldn't scare it. When we got to the truck, we grabbed the camera, turned around to take a picture, but then it was gone. We never heard a sound, and it never tried to scare us. We felt like it just wanted us to see it. Billy Joe Miller, Spanaway, Washington. Wow. Fort Lewis, man. You know how many people there must be that were employed there, did training there, whatever, that are aware of these hairy people? Holy cow, there's a pile of people that are aware just from that one place, right? I wonder how many of you are here watching this channel. How many of you are still are active at Fort Lewis and have stuff going on today? I'd be curious to know. That was quite the bold statement that guy made about how they were not instructed to not shoot them back in '79. And he claims to feel that they could have easily shot them all. That's pretty bizarre, blatant, strong claim, right? Who knows? Might have been a little bit of over ego in there, maybe, because I myself find that hard to believe that any group of humans could easily go wipe out a complete population of these beings. I don't think so myself. But anyway, all right. So if you do a little bit of a search, there is acres and acres of articles on missing or dead people on Mount Rainier. One article starts off with 25 just this year, which is 2022. Whether it's legit or not, I don't know. And then you see a question in the internet saying, how many people are dead on Mount Rainier? According to data compiled by the National Park Service, boy, aren't they a honest bunch. As of 2022, more than 400 people had died in Mount Rainier National Park since the government records were first kept. About 25% of those deaths occurred while climbing on the mountain, which is an active volcano. How many bodies? Mitigating risk was everything on the most glaciated peak in the lower 48, where over 400 people had died and many bodies, like the 32 Marines from the 46 accident, are forever entombed within the glaciers. Anyway, I could go on there forever. There's a lot of people missing on Mount Rainier. A lot. And there's a lot of frickin' sightings of beings on Mount Rainier since whatever time began, right? Especially within the military base. There you go. Anybody's got some direct first-hand knowledge of Mount Rainier? I'm curious. Now let's get into the inbox. This is from Cujo, our main man, ex-law enforcement, kick-ass dude, the Cooch. Steve Cujo here. I may have sent this to you in the past, but I'm going to send it again. It's about an NDE that I experienced and my guardian angel. Near-death experience. Here we go. I never got to the point of seeing myself outside of my body, but this is what happened to me. In 2006, as the sergeant of a gang unit in Oxnard, California. One night while working gang enforcement, I was working with a partner, and we were trying to extract a gang member from the back seat of a car. The short story is he was sitting on a gun, and as we pulled him through the window, he put the gun under my chin and pulled the trigger. Ooh. I never saw the gun. A 9mm semi-automatic. 1 second I was dragging the guy through the window of the car and I heard half a gunshot and everything turned bright white and was silent. This all happened in the fraction of a second, but it seemed like longer. I remember thinking to myself, I just got shot. I'm dead. At least it doesn't hurt. And after having that thought, I just waited for what was next. Then it wasn't a voice, but I had a very clear thought in my head that said, you're not dead. And you're not going to die. Just stay awake and keep breathing. In the very next second, I was face down in the street looking into a pool of my own blood as it pumped out of my neck. Between the time I was back on the street and the time I got to the hospital, there were several times where I felt myself drifting away and I just wanted to go to sleep. But that voice kept coming back. Stay awake, keep breathing. After my recovery, my surgeon told me that he was very surprised that I had survived, that the bullet had taken the only path it could have through my neck without killing me. It broke my jaw and ricocheted through my neck instead of going up into my brain. It then turned before it hit my spine and then went right between my carotid and jugular. For years I thought it was me talking to myself, telling myself to do this, to stay awake and keep breathing, and that I was just very lucky. But I later learned from another experience that I had that it was actually my deceased mother. She passed away from cancer very early in my career. 6 years after being shot, I was told by a medium that it was my mother. And my mother was my guardian angel. This person told me that the only reason I made it through that many years of being a police officer, 3 different shootings, multiple different events where I should have been killed was because of my mom. I was told that she's always with me when I'm at work. Now I know what you're thinking. Mediums are fake. I used to think that too, but this woman proved to me that she was the real thing. She works on the Santa Monica Pier for donations, and I sat down kind of as a joke to see just what would happen. As soon as I sat down, I asked her what she needed to know to get started. And she said, "Don't tell me anything. If there is a spirit that wants to make contact with you, they'll let me know." So I didn't tell her anything. Not my name, what I did, nothing. And after a few seconds, she looks at me and she says, "You're a protector, either a soldier or a policeman." She told me that there was a female spirit that was visiting with me right then. And after a few seconds, she called me by my first name and said, "You know, you can't even see where that bullet hit you in the face." Steve, I didn't tell her anything. I didn't tell her my name. I didn't tell her I'd been shot, but she knew. Then she told me that it was my mom who protected me that night, that she was always with me when I was at work, and that she was my guardian angel. She also said a lot of other things about my mother that verified to me that it was true. And also a second spirit arrived, but wasn't saying anything. She said the second spirit was another female spirit that was wearing gold boots. I knew right away that was my grandmother. She had this crazy pair of gold boots she wore to special occasions, and she wore them to my academy graduation with pink tights and a pink blouse and a gold scarf. Hot. Here's another example of her protecting me. When I was a new cop after my mom died, only a couple years in, I thought I knew it all. I thought I was a badass. I thought my shit didn't stink and that nobody would ever get anything over on me. One day I saw an older hardcore OG gang member walking down the street, and I just decided to watch him. He saw me watching him and continued to walk, and I watched him for a good 5 or 10 minutes just walking down the street. He then walked up to the front of a house. I pulled my car up and parked it, checked out on the radio, and sorry, I'm losing my spot. I took my eyes off him for about 5 seconds. I asked him to come down and talk to me, and he did. He was cooperative. He did everything I told him to do the whole time, kind of chuckling and shaking his head. He had a parole violation warrant, so I arrested him and took him into the jail. Before doing that, I found a loaded 1911 .45 on the front porch where he was standing when I first contacted him. The people in the house said the gun was not theirs. I assumed it was his. When I interviewed him, I did everything by the book. I read him his rights, and again, he was completely cooperative, still kind of chuckling and shaking his head. I had my tape recorder on while I was doing this. He indicated that he didn't want to talk. I asked him if there was anything else he wanted to say, or if he had any questions. He then pointed at the tape recorder. I knew he wanted me to turn it off, so I played along, and I did so. I asked him what he wanted to talk about, and he said, "You're a rookie, right?" At first I lied, and I told him that I wasn't a rookie, and that I'd been a police officer for several years. He sat back, shook his head, and now looked kind of concerned. He said, "No, you're a rookie. The only reason I didn't kill you, stupid ass, is because you look so goddamn stupid, and I felt sorry for you." First I was angry, but then I realized he was right. I made some mistakes. I mean, how did you drop that gun without me seeing it? So I decided to tell him the truth and told him I only had a couple years on. He then took me to school for the next 45 minutes or so. He told me that he was an animal, a killer, and I cannot treat him the way I treat other people. He said if I gave him any kind of a chance that he would exploit it and be able to get away or hurt me. And that's exactly what I did when I stopped him by giving him the time and looking away. He told me that when I saw somebody like him walking down the street, and if I thought I was going to stop him, that I needed to do it right away and to keep my eyes on him, because by doing it right away, it gives him less time to think and put him off balance. He gave me several other pieces of advice as well. When I asked him why he was doing this, he said after a long pause, "I don't know. was planning on killing you as soon as I knew you were going to stop me. Something just happened. Something changed my mind. Something told me not to do it and to just cooperate with you. And that's never happened to me before. And I may be a murderer and an animal, but I may be going to hell, but I still believe in God. And that voice was powerful, and I knew I needed to do what it told me to do. Whoa. There's other weird things that have happened to me too during my career, Steve. Like the second shooting I was in was during a robbery. There were shots fired inside of a business, and when I went in there was a bad guy pointing a gun at us. He was 10 feet away from me. There was no way he would have missed. But before we came in, this robber was in a fight with the clerk, and during the fight, the magazine fell out in the bottom of his gun, and the round that was chambered was discharged by accident. That was the shot that we heard. So when we came in, the bad guy had an empty gun with no chambered bullet. We still shot him. I mean, he did point the gun at us. We had no idea that it was empty. Some people say I was just very lucky, but I know now it was more than luck. Cujo. Holy shit, dude. I can totally imagine the stories you and your buddies have for your coworkers. Must be insane, especially working where there's big city gangs. Whoa. Creepy. Obviously, there's other shit going on right besides this flesh and blood existence, without a doubt, but the mysteries that are going on while we're alive here are crazy. The whole mysteries being withheld, the skills we more than likely should have, but we don't. Freedom, all sorts of shit, right? It's a crazy-ass shit show. And having a curious mind is almost like a sentence in a way at times, right? Excuse me, funny when you mentioned that, everything white. I remember, I've had so many, there's not a doubt in my mind, we all have somebody, well, most of us, many of us have somebody watching over us. I know somebody's watching over me. There is not a doubt in my frickin' mind. Not a doubt. I should have been dead so many times, it creeps me out. I just cannot believe I never died. I don't know how many times. And obviously my life hasn't been your common one. Right? With the shit that I've done this lifetime is a little over the top at times, right? With adventure life. Single, no kids, adventure life. And not fearing death. Kind of leads you into some crazy shit. But anyway, one time, I'll share some stories with you guys. One time I was guiding a man. I even remember his name. I won't say anything. He's actually a doctor from Louisiana. And we were sheep hunting, guiding him for sheep in August. Finally got his ass up to top of these nasty ass peaks in the Rocky Mountains, and he's down here below me to my left, squatting down, hiding behind a rock. And I'm on this big plate rock, looking into this basin. And it was like 200 yards, 250, whatever it was. This great big ram. There's 7 rams there. And he had a Weatherby 300 Magnum. Weatherby 300, 300 Weatherby. Magna ported at the end of the barrel. So for all those who aren't familiar, that's this little chunk of metal extension on your barrel with holes coming at all the sides of it. So it takes away a bunch of the kick when it smashes you when you pull the trigger, and blows that blast out to the sides. So that barrel of the gun, while he's squatting down, the tip of it's right here. If you can see that, it's just a knife, but this is where the barrel of his gun was, right about there. And he's squatting down tight beside me, right? He's just sitting like this, looking up at me. I look down at him and I say, okay, put one in the tube and use this rock as a rest. And it's a straight shot, 250, 200, whatever it was. He's like, okay. And he goes and works he worked the bolt of his rifle to put a round in the tube, and boom, it went off. 300 Weatherby with the Magport, the barrel tip right here went off right there. Boom. And everything did go white, and everything went dead silent and blew me to the side. It was almost like I got kicked in the head, like a soccer kick to the head. It was bizarre, the force. And my ears are still, I can hear my ear ringing like a SOB right now, clear as day. Some days it's worse. But I got to live with it every day. And then, because it's not the only time either, right? I had another guy shooting at wolves with his gun right behind my head. Felt like he blew my head off. Got dinged again. But anyway, I remember thinking, oh my God, I'm shot. He shot me. I just got shot. I'll put it. You sharing your story, Cooch, took me back to that moment of me thinking I got shot. Everything went white and dead silent. Boom. That was a close one. And working those gangs, man, I remember one time, I'm going to show you guys another story. I got shit piles of stories. Growing up in Vancouver Island, I think I grew up with this is a bizarre story. I grew up with probably 3.5 black kids in my school my whole lifetime. And three of them are great friends of mine. So it was a little different for me the very first time I went to the States, flew into Memphis, Tennessee, and almost everybody's black. It's kind of different from me being not used to seeing almost the whole population of being black. And me not knowing anything. It's this kid from Vancouver Island. I don't know if everybody hated me, but everybody did. And everybody was very kind and very warm and friendly, just so you know. But it was odd just for me to see the majority of the population being black instead of white, where I was raised and grew up. Now fast forward to another time I was taken to Pittsburgh. And at that time, we only had Cops. The show Cops is real popular, seeing what's going on in Cops. And when I used to go to the States and tour around all over the place, after guiding all year, I just go look at everything. I'd go see everything. So I want to see everything. And I always found that the easiest people for me to just go up and talk to were cops. And I go up and talk to police all the time. And one time, these two cops took me for lunch. Black cop and a white cop took me for lunch. Started bullshitting with me. And I said to them, I go, hey, do you guys think I could ride around with you guys on a Friday night or something, or Saturday night? And I'll never forget, the black cop, he goes, what? What, you crazy? I go, what do you mean? Man, you're going to get shot at. I'm like, what? What? He goes, hell yeah. And I go, are you serious? And they're both laughing because I'm surprised that they're telling me that they're both going to get shot at. And they goes, hell, we'll go to a dozen shooting calls right at closing time in the middle of the week every night. He goes, most of them can't shoot that. I could, but yeah, we get shot at all the time. And they're laughing. I'm like, oh my God, no way. You guys are nuts. But they both thought that I was crazy because I went after grizzly bears. They thought that was nuts and said, no thanks. Isn't that bizarre? The different experiences of people around the globe, right? But I'll never forget that. How they told me they get shot at all the time. And that they would go to shootings, multiple shootings just that night. And I said, let me come with you guys. He says, I don't know, man. We'd have to ask our sergeant, maybe sign some kind of a waiver. It never went down. But anyway, I'll never forget this. Get this one. We're in Pittsburgh. Friend of mine, football player. He says, we're going to Pittsburgh for St. Patrick's Day weekend. And I was joking around with him with another friend who I got. He's saying they're going to take me to Pittsburgh. I said, I want to see the hood, man. I heard about the hood. I want to see the hood. I'm just innocent, wanting to see shit. And our other friend said, do not take him to the hood. I'm like, what? Please, come on. You know, you're thinking you're this big badass because you go after wounded grizzly bears in your hands and knees and bushes. So humans aren't scary. And the dude says, do not take him to the hood. He goes, don't go to the hood. I'm like, please. He goes, you're going to get shot at. You're probably going to get killed. And I was absolutely naive. I didn't know what was really going down in some of these big cities in the U.S. and probably other places in the world at the time. I didn't care. I'm like, come on, I want to see this. And my buddy's a football player in the States. He's like, no big deal. I got a handgun. You'll be fine. Okay, let's go. I'll never forget this. So we dropped off his wife and mother-in-law in town in the city. Her mother-in-law was from there. And we started driving down the street. And it looked like the street started looking to me like in the beginning of the old show Archie Bunker, All in the Family, whatever it's called, when all the stairs come down off of the buildings into the streets. And you start noticing people are just sitting all over the stairs. And sun's out, middle of the day. And then we're getting a little farther in. There isn't any white people anywhere. It's odd for me to see. And then, but then I noticed as the deeper we got in to this one particular neighborhood, and he goes, we're not even in the hood yet. And we're going, we're not? Wow. And then all of a sudden you see children, kids, seeing that we were white. And the look these kids were giving me were like I just killed their puppy dog or something. It was so intimidating, and it was so bizarre for me to see that these young children had that hate in them just for the color of somebody's skin. It was really bizarre for me to be an innocent, a bystander, but I mean, you got to think about it. I grew up on an island in the Pacific coast of Canada, right? And oblivious to this. Nothing. No knowledge, no experience, no nothing. I didn't know nothing. Shit. And I remember all these kids, they're looking at you, giving the dirt eye. They're looking at me like they wanted to kill me. These children knew how to have this look of hate and intimidation. It was really freaking me out. I'm like, holy shit, man, what's going on around here? He's like, yeah, they're not too happy with us. And I'm like, well, I didn't do anything, you know. Anyway, and then the farther we got in there, and he still says, we're not even in the hood, man. And I'm like, I think this is probably good enough. You know, like it was getting to the point, I was looking up ahead in traffic. I'm like, shit, I hope that light doesn't go red. Like I was feeling very uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. There was a lot of people. No white people. And I don't need white people. I'm just saying there was no white people, and everybody that saw that I was white were starting to look at me like I was a piece of shit. It was very, very odd experience. And then we got into another part of town where we got up top of this hill, and there's these odd-shaped corner buildings on the corner of a street and stuff. I'll never forget this. And you looked all the way down this long road, and every single window or opening was the color of plywood for the first 8 feet, the first floor, all the way down the whole hood street. And there's cars parked on both sides. And every once in a while, there is the car with the typical chain, the welded chain steering wheel, you know, the pimp-looking mobile that you'd see in typical movies. And you could hear a couple pops. Frickin' gunshots. And my buddy's like, get out, take a picture of this. Like, I remember him telling me, he's going, we're going to show you every slice of Americana we can. Come on, get out, take a picture of that for your friends when you get back home. And honestly, I'm like, no, I don't want to. Let's just get out of here. I've had enough. I don't want to be here. This is shitty. I don't want to be here. And he's like, no, get out. Just get out. And it's a big, big A-type dude. And I'm like, shit. And I'll tell you right now, the feeling I had getting out of that car in that neighborhood to take a picture of that long street, I still have it somewhere, I felt like the only way I could imagine it felt was if I was in a shark diving cage and they're telling me to get out of the cage, take a clear picture of that great white right there. That's how it felt for me to get out of that car. A guy who isn't scared to go after a wounded grizzly bear alone in the bushes. That's how it felt. I was shitting myself getting out of a car in a human being neighborhood. Pretty intimidating, man. So, I guess that's making me picture the Cooge, what he did for a living and who he was policing in the areas they went to. Very, very scary. Take it easy, puppy. It's all good. The neighbors are working. Anyway, I thought I had that story. I got a lot more. We went even deeper into the hood, and it wasn't a good experience for me. It was a big eye-opener, a lot of hate, a lot of racism going back and forth on both sides, right? A lot of real shittiness going on in those neighborhoods. Yeah, it's really bizarre. Anyway, it's a bit of a ramble today, isn't it? Okay, I'm going to get going, get on with my day. And I'll, to see about getting a few more people on here with me to have conversations and share with me some shit they know, shit they've seen and recently. All right? I'll let everybody know where I'm going soon enough. So, share my story at howtohunt.com. That's where you get it shared word for word. All right? And some people might complain maybe that because we're having a few emails lately of near-death experiences, but believe me, every single thing ties in together. If you want to make sense of some things, you got to look at other things, all right? So we're going to listen to everything. Cooge, appreciate you, man. I'm glad you're still alive. That's some shit-eating experience, dude. You should write a book. Anyway, I'll be back later.